On a sweltering Texas summer day in 1993, a work crew noticed something unusual off the side of the road. Under a thicket of thorn bushes was the nude, decapitated body of a young girl. Just 200 feet away was another body, a young white male. Residents of this small town wondered who would brutally kill two young people in this way, and what was the possible motive. Cut Off Road, a remote spot in Tellico, Texas, linked by a rickety wooden bridge over Smith Creek. This is the area where a road crew discovered the nude body of an adolescent girl. She had been shot, stabbed, decapitated, and her hands removed. She also had extensive wounds on her abdomen, thighs, and genital area. Under the bridge was another victim. A young white male, fully clothed, who had been shot twice in the head with a .22 caliber pistol. On a barbed wire fence, detectives found several long blonde hairs. In the boy's back pocket was a wallet with a library card.
The library card had the name, which stated James Brian King. And we thought that may be him, but we weren't sure at this point because it was not a photo ID type. It was just a card with a name on it.
The girl's identification was more difficult, since there were no hands for fingerprints, and with the decapitation, no opportunity for a dental comparison.
She looked like a young, adolescent, teenage white girl. She also had amputations of both nipples and a number of other cuts, mostly on the front of her body. She had some very long cuts down the front of the abdomen with extrusion or evisceration of part of the intestines to the outside.
A rape test kit showed no signs of sexual assault. Homicide investigators visited the father of the boy, James King.
And we showed Mr. King the wallet that had been retrieved from a white male's body, and he opened it and looked at some of the photos and looked at the library card, and we could tell his eyes began to get watery. And he said, yeah, I recognize the wallet. This is the wallet I gave to him, my son.
Mr. King also said that the girl's body might be his stepdaughter, 13-year-old Christina Benjamin, but wasn't sure because of the condition of the body. Mr. King told police that a few nights earlier, Brian was sleeping outside in a hammock when a car sounded its horn out front. He saw Brian talking to someone in a tan car. Then Brian got in and left. The next day, the family discovered that Christina was missing too. Investigators compared the hair on Christina's hairbrush to several long blonde hairs found near the murder scene on the barbed wire fence.
Once the hairs from the barbed wire and the hairs from the strand that were found out at the crime scene location were submitted to the laboratory, I produced microscope slides, and I compared those hairs to the hairs from the hairbrush, and they were microscopically consistent with one another.
The family also provided police with an X-ray of Christina's recent foot injury. That X-ray matched an X-ray of the girl's foot taken at the autopsy.
The night they found her, or the day they found her, Donna called me up that night. And she said, "Mom, I need some help." She said, "Chrissy, Dad, she's been murdered." And I couldn't believe it. And that's how we found out about it.
I could never imagine losing a child. And nobody, unless it's happened to you, nobody else can either. I can't imagine what my mom went through.
In the crime lab, Charles Lynch found a foreign blonde head hair on Brian King's pants, which did not belong to either Brian or Christina. Lynch also spotted a single fiber attached to Brian's sneaker. It was nearly invisible.
I looked at the fiber from the male victim's shoe using transmitted light microscopy. I'd seen those types of carpet fibers before, usually from Japanese vehicles, and this was a tan fiber, so that was my communication to the police, that it may be from a tan vehicle of Japanese make.
Investigators hoped that this single fiber would lead them to the automobile Brian King got into on his last night alive. grisly murder of two local teenagers was a highly publicized case in the small Texas community where the bodies were found. The viciousness of the murders even shocked the pathologist in this case.
It's the worst case of mutilation that I've seen in my work here. I have seen other cases of mutilation and seen a lot of cases of what they'd call the crimes of passion or overkill, where someone's stabbed or shot multiple times. But this is the only case I've seen like this where someone had this much mutilation of the body, probably after death.
Psychological profilers say that killers like this usually have aberrant drives and appetites. The savage treatment of Christina was indicative of vengeance and extreme hatred, and suggested that the killer knew the victim. Local prosecutors went to the FBI Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico, Virginia, to find out more about the mindset of this killer.
One of them said to me, after he looked at the photographs, he said, this is not a sexual crime. And I was a little confused because obviously she was nude and never found her clothing. And he said, whoever committed this crime did not have sex with her.
One trait common among individuals who have committed similar crimes is a history of abusing animals. Neighbors told police that Brian and Christina were planning to go out with a boy named Jason on the night they disappeared. And there was an anonymous telephone call to the sheriff's office.
The caller supposedly told this dispatcher that we needed to be looking at his subject by the name of Jason Massey.
Jason Massey was a 20-year-old high school dropout, the son of an alcoholic and drug user who spent his time moving from one run-down tenement to another. Jason was a petty criminal with a history of stalking, harassment, theft, and most surprisingly, a history of abuse to animals.
A couple of days before the discovery of the bodies, Ennis police had received a call of a calf had been mutilated behind McDonald's. On their arrival, they observed a tan car. They also found a bracelet on the ground with the name Jason on it. There was a figurehead ran from the scene who was later identified as Jason Eric Massey.
Massey's friends painted a bizarre portrait of the troubled young man.
This guy also told me about how Jason Massey liked to mutilate animals such as dogs, cats, cows, and that Jason would, every chance he'd get, he would kill a dog and cut his head off. And he calls them his trophies. And I said, well, what does he do with these heads? He said, well, he keeps them in a metal cooler.
And police discovered evidence that Massey knew Brian and Christina casually.
Jason Massey made comments about Christina, about how he really liked her and he wanted to take her out.
While everything seemed to point to Massey, there was very little forensic evidence found at the crime scene.
No smoking gun, so to speak. The case had to be developed. We had 2 children. The bodies were horrific, the way they were found, particularly the girl. Much work needed to be done to develop it.
The great difficulty in the case all along was what happened. How did this boy get killed? How did the girl get killed? What was the sequence? What was she sexually assaulted? What was the motive? Why was it done? And that was completely missing from the crime scene.
Police brought Jason Massey in for questioning.
I said, Jason, I said, I want you to see something. And he looked at me and I threw down some photos of the crime scene, which showed Christina Benjamin and Brian King. And I said, Jason, I said, I want you to look at her. I said, tell me one thing. I said, is she as pretty now in these photos as she was that night that you had her? And he looked down and he looked at me, and the next thing I know, he's kind of bending over and he's gagging real big time, And I knew I had hit a soft spot in him, when he did that. I'll never will forget that expression of him.
Despite the circumstantial evidence against Jason Massey, there was no proof. For that, investigators needed scientific evidence. Armed with a search warrant, police collected samples of Jason Massey's hair and also impounded his Subaru automobile. A piece of the tan carpet was removed for scientific analysis. Also inside were 3 stains on the seat, which tested positive for blood.
When we got into the trunk of Jason Massey's car, there was a single leaf with a blood stain on it, a roll of duct tape with apparent blood on it, and also a hammer that appeared to have blood on it.
There was no sign of the .22 caliber weapon used in the murders. However, police did find a cash register receipt for some .22 caliber ammunition, as well as a set of handcuffs and a hunting knife. Investigators received another phone tip. This one saying that Massey was seen washing his car inside and out at a local car wash. Police immediately searched the contents of the vacuum machine at that car wash. Inside, they found an appointment card from Massey's probation officer and a number of long blonde hairs.
Head hairs from the vehicle of Jason Massey and head hairs found at the car wash location were all microscopically similar to those of Christina Benjamin.
The blood found in Massey's car was tested for DNA, but it couldn't be compared to the bodies since they were too badly degraded for DNA analysis. Instead, scientists relied on reverse paternity genotyping. By analyzing the DNA profile of Brian and Christina's biological parents and comparing it to the DNA profile of the blood in Massey's car, scientists could see if there were similar genetic markers.
We were able to determine that yes, much more certainly that blood did come from Christina Benjamin.
Scientists also needed to know if the time of the deaths matched the time frame Jason Massey and his automobile were in the victim's neighborhood.
Our best evidence was a forensic entomologist that looking at the larva activity found on the bodies could come up with a pretty good idea of when they were killed in relation to each other and in relation to time in general.
Samples of the insect larvae from both bodies were sent to the prominent forensic entomologist Dr. Neil Haskell. Haskell studied the larvae and attempted to cultivate live larvae from the same heat and humidity conditions that existed in Texas the week the bodies were found. By doing this, Dr. Haskell could approximate the time between when the flies laid their eggs on the bodies and the larvae developed to the stage in which they were found. Dr. Haskell determined that Christina and Brian died 2 days before their bodies were discovered. This coincided with the time frame that the tan automobile, similar to Massey's, was in front of Brian and Christina's home. Jason Massey was arrested and charged with capital murder. He pleaded not guilty.
Jason Massey was a handsome young man, and I was worried that if he took the stand and testified that he might sway some of the jurors.
Guilt or innocence would be determined by the forensic evidence.
No one of those sciences was able to show beyond reasonable doubt that Massey committed the crime, but put all together, it meant that either Massey had committed the crime, or he had to be the most unlucky person in the history of the world, because every piece of evidence pointed toward him.
Before the trial ended, prosecutors learned even more about Jason Massey. Information that would seal his fate. In 1994, Jason Massey went on trial in Texas for the murders of 14-year-old Brian King and 13-year-old Christina Benjamin. Prosecutors believe that both Brian and Christina got into Jason Massey's car around midnight on July 27th for a ride in the country. Prosecutors also believe Massey's plans included much more than just a ride. Massey stopped his car on the Cutoff Road Bridge and shot Brian King twice in the head at point-blank range with a .22 caliber pistol. He then pushed him out of the car off the side of the bridge. Christina got out of the car and ran. Jason followed, shot her in the back. But the wound wasn't fatal. Later, he shot her in the head, then stabbed her. Prosecutors believe the mutilation occurred after death. Christina's head and hands have never been recovered. The motive was difficult for prosecutors to identify.
There was no traditional motive in this case, and instead, Massey was most likely what's referred to as a lust murderer. That is, a person that receives a certain degree of sexual gratification from the killing and mutilation of human beings.
Before the trial was over, a hunter walking in the woods made a gruesome discovery. He found a red cooler inside with the decapitated heads of 31 animals, and also the journals of Jason Massey revealing his hideous deeds and horrific thoughts. These Slayer books of death, as Massey called them, were a frightening and incriminating insight into the mind of a killer. A mind obsessed with murder, sex, and mutilation of young girls. The jury found Jason Eric Massey guilty of the 2 murders. Two young lives were avenged.
Mr. Massey, any comments on your guilty conviction?
No, ma'am, I'm just glad it's over.
For the penalty phase, Prosecutors had just 24 hours to assemble the information contained in Jason Massey's journals to convince the court that the death penalty was appropriate.
He started out with killing 8 cows, 30 dogs, and 39 cats that he cut off their heads and kept them as trophies.
Here's one where he's talking about a little girl, and he says that he loves her and he's decided to kill her. He just doesn't know when.
Prosecutors told the jury that Jason Massey's journal contained evidence that he had planned to kill again and again. Massey's writings revealed that his greatest aspiration in life was to become the most famous serial killer in America.
We wanted the jury to know just the kind of person that we were dealing with. And that person was one that was obviously going to be a predator of incredible proportions.
The jury deliberated just 15 minutes and decided upon the death penalty.
Well, the judge said, I sentence you to death by lethal injection, and the only injustice in this court today will be that your death will be so much more humane than that of your victims. The judge said that. And everybody stood up and cheered for the judge.
Jason Massey was executed on April 3rd, 2001. Christina's grandparents witnessed his last moments alive.
This was Jason Eric Massey's final statement just prior to his execution. He said, yes, first I would like to speak to the victim's family. First of all, I would like to say that I do not know that any of y'all, and that's unfortunate because I'd like to apologize to each and every one of you individually. I can't imagine what I've taken from y'all, but I do want to apologize.
I apologize to you for what I did. I want you to know that it was only I who committed the murders. No one else was involved. Christina felt no pain. The things done to her occurred after her death. I swear, the things done to her occurred after her death. I swear. Her head and hands I threw into the Trinity River. I didn't rape or torture her either. I admit my guilt, and I ask your forgiveness. I pray you will forgive me. If not now, then in the future. May God be with you and keep you through this. His servant, Jason Eric Massey. I don't know how to describe it other than we watched him die. We had no emotions other than we were watching this person die. He kept mouthing, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. We didn't believe him. No, there's no way that you could forgive this man for what he did.
It was quick, it was painless. He was lucky. You know. The way I look at it, my brother and my stepsister weren't so lucky. I mean, you know, they died horrible deaths.
I'm not the one that was going to have to judge him. And I can't judge him, but I can never forgive him.
Detectives are very good and efficient. They did their jobs well.